My name is Federica Siena and I work for the Mare Center of the University of Milano Bicocca. With today's presentation, we would like to announce the launch of a national monitoring protocol for coral reef restoration projects. The manual is the result of a collaboration between Mare Center of the University of Milano Bicocca and the Maldives Marine Research Institute of the Ministry of Fisheries, Marine Resources and Agriculture of the Maldives. The manual was first announced in this venue almost 2 years ago, and it's now available for download from today on the Mare Center website as well as on the National Coral Reef Monitoring Framework website. In light of a global decline of coral reefs, which has seen numerous reefs moving from pristine condition to degraded one, numerous organizations have resorted to coral reef restoration. Coral reef restoration has in fact been widely used worldwide and also in the Maldives to assist the recovery of an ecosystem that has been degraded, damaged, or destroyed. The idea is actually to kickstart the recovery of an ecosystem, not to create a brand new reef. In this sense, restoration ecology requires not only the ability to manipulate an ecosystem, but also the ability to assess whether the changes are producing the desired outcomes. It is therefore paramount to monitor coral reef restoration and to do so in a consistent way. Within this framework, our manual would like to bring about the required change for consistent and collective data collection. The manual is divided into 4 main sections. First, highlighting how and why the manual was developed. Then, giving a brief introduction on the current situation in the Maldives and in coral reef restoration in general. Then, we describe the different sections of monitoring. And lastly, we provide precise indication on how to collect data. You will find within the manual several boxes. The first box, the inside box, provide additional theoretical information. The recommendation boxes provide suggestions on how to successfully conduct certain processes. And finally, the technical advice boxes illustrate practical aspects of the operations. The idea of this manual was to develop a regional protocol for data collection in a consistent way. The idea is to elevate the credibility of coral reef restoration to determine the cumulative efforts and impacts of projects carried out in the Maldives, and to also to be able to share successes, failures, and challenges due to the urgency to act. The manual is designed to allow practitioners with different experience and availability of time to be able to contribute. The idea is to work with different level of expertise, but also to be able to give a contribution. The manual is focused on methods of asexual propagation. This chapter provides a background on Maldivian coral reefs and a description of coral reef restoration main drivers and components. We are providing a general overview of the most important steps in planning and execution, such as, for example, how to correctly select sites, how to form a team, how to select and collect coral fragments. This chapter focuses on the different components of monitoring. We will be using in this chapter the term indicator for key variables which are used to detect changes and assess the evolution of a system. The term parameter are instead used as a different ways to measure an indicator. The ecological indicators will be either mandatory or discretionary according to the different phases. Mandatory indicators provide information on the global status of coral reef restoration projects. Discretionary indicator provide additional yet very important information. We will talk about this a bit later in the presentation. Some indicators are referred to the fate of coral fragments or coral colonies in general, other to the effects of coral reef restoration on the community or the effects of the community on coral reef restoration project. Each project will then have some specific features which may influence its performance, such as, for example, the type of techniques adopted. An important aspect, which is often overlooked and rarely studied in coral reef restoration projects, is the impact of coral reef restoration on the community and the economy. Therefore, we propose here the study of 3 main indicators: the satisfaction of stakeholders, the impact through conservation activities, and finally, the long-term viability of each project. Let's take a look at some examples of ecological indicators. A traditional indicator, survival, is described. We describe the procedure which are requested to collect data in a simple or in advanced way. The simple way collects data in a binary way. Corals may be alive or dead. The advanced way provides the degree of a live tissue. We highlight also the tools required for the data collection. A slightly less used indicator which we propose here to use is the associated fauna, as we believe that organisms which are living within coral colony may have positive or negative impacts on the coral colonies and the projects itself. We explain in a box the role of organism within the coral colony. Then, again, we illustrate the procedure, simple and advanced, requested for the data collection, and we highlight the tools which are needed for the data collection. For what concerns the socioeconomic indicators, we recognize that they are rarely studied, with only few projects assessing the impact on the community and the economy. As we were saying before, we propose three main indicators. First, we have Reef user satisfaction, which aims at understanding the importance and performance that stakeholders give to certain attributes of a project. It is a measurable tool as each attribute is rated on a scale from 1 to 5 for importance and satisfaction. Then we analyze the financial sustainability, as many papers have highlighted that the long-term financial sustainability is one of the features that may cause the stop of a restoration project. The suggested question for this section may be important tools for practitioners to keep track of the costs and funds available, plus provide regular reports on their activities on the interested parties. Lastly, coral reef restoration projects may have an impact on numerous stakeholders in terms of awareness raised and ecosystem services benefited. Again, these information are of great importance for communication with stakeholders. The fourth chapter looks more into each of the phases, highlighting what the mandatory and discretionary indicators are for each of them, and offering example on how to collect socioeconomic data. For each phase, we will find a brief description on how to organize the monitoring to allow long-term monitoring and handling of surveys by multiple people. Then there's a brief section on project-specific data which influence the project. It might be, for example, the depth of transplant, the density of transplant, or how corals were attached to the substrate. These are not mandatory information, yet there might be key features influencing the success of a project. Looking at the mandatory and discretionary indicator, we can see that, for example, in situ nurseries, associated fauna is a mandatory indicator, yet it is a discretionary indicator in restoration sites. On the other hand, fishes community is a discretionary indicator in situ nurseries, but it becomes a mandatory indicator in restoration and reference sites. We then offer a schedule on when it is suggested to collect data. The example provided here is for a restoration and reference site. Lastly, we show examples of data sheets both for time zero at the beginning of monitoring as well as for subsequent monitoring, highlighting again what those mandatory and discretionary indicators for each phases are. We will see more about this in a couple of slides. The socioeconomic section provides example of questionnaire for each of the three suggested components of the socioeconomic analysis and suggests how to analyze data, for example, through important performance analysis, in order to create reports which might be useful to communicate progresses to the different stakeholders. Let's take a look now at how can then data be entered into a national database. You may be familiar with the National Coral Reef Monitoring Framework database website, which you can find at the link above here. Clicking on its protocol section down here, you will be able to access the full Coral Reef Restoration Monitoring website from today onwards. By going back to the main website and clicking on the data submission section and scrolling down, you will be finding different sections for the different phases of the project. Donor sites, in situ, ex situ, restoration, and referent site sections. By clicking on each of these sections, you will be able to access a Google form where again you will be able to download the full manual as well as download the data sheets which are useful for data collection for each of the different phases. Once you have downloaded the data sheets, you will be able to see that there will be different tabs. Tabs for the collection at time zero, and then tabs for the collection during subsequent surveys, called time X. Once you have downloaded and filled in this information, by going back to the Google form, you will be able to upload those information for the national database. As one of the goals of this effort is to speed up the recovery of ecosystem by increasing the communication between practitioners, we hope that many of you will take part in this effort. While thanking you for your attention, we provide you up here our direct contacts in case of feedbacks, as we recognize that this first version of the manual for coral reef restoration monitoring might require adjustments after many of you have tried it out. Thank you very much for your attention.